Welcome to these Travel Times talks here at the Adventure Overland Show 2017. These are brought to you in partnership with Rimmer Brothers, who have a vast array of aftermarket OEM and genuine parts for all Land Rover vehicles at competitive prices. More importantly to you guys, they will deliver them all around the world fast. So if you've any problems, these are the places to come to. There's now a brand new accessories catalogue out with a comprehensive range of Land Rover vehicles, from Range Rover Classics up to, well, vehicles of today. There's also the popular parts catalogue, and this is a great accessory to put in your glove box. For more details, do visit the website at rimmerbrothers.co.uk. Enjoy the talk.
Thank you for coming. We are Overlanding Family. We've just spent 4 years driving around the world. We have just arrived back. We've been back exactly a month. So we're still in that sort of turmoil of, readjusting to living back in England. But this is what we did. We went to 58 countries, 111,000 miles, and we managed to get to all 7 continents on our trip. It took us 4 years. There's 4 of us: Steve, myself, Lucy, and Alisha here as well. The girls were just 4.5 and 8 when we left. So Lucy's been travelling for half her life. And, of course, the 5th member of the family, our truckie. You'll see him out parked in the Overland Sphere area. If you want to come have a look, you're welcome to. It's definitely, as long as 5 of us were healthy on this trip and everything was working well with 5 of us, it was good. So he's definitely, part of our trip. We're doing 2 talks. We're talking today and also tomorrow. Today we're going to cover planning for the trip, North and Central America, homeschooling, obviously something different with the kids, South America, Antarctica, when things go wrong, and also shipping. It's going to be hard to condense, this 4-year trip into 40-minute presentations, but we're going to give it a go. And then tomorrow, if it's okay, come along, and we're going to talk about Africa, Australia, life on the road, Asia, learning on the road, our frustrations, the Himalayas, and from the stands home. And the last thing is what we've learned, because obviously it's been a big learning experience.
So planning for the trip. Gilly and I actually both have a love of travel, as you'd imagine, and that's actually what brought us together. 22 years ago, we met on a trip across Africa, the organised overland trips. For people may know things like Dragoman, or the trip we were on was actually Encounter Overland. And so we met 22 years ago. That was our holiday romance, you could say. And I suppose ever since we'd done that trip, we wanted to do a trip of our own. And so even 20 odd years ago, we started talking about doing a large overland trip by ourselves in our own vehicle. Initially, that was sort of the vision of buying a Land Rover, putting a roof tent on the roof, of course, and then driving to somewhere, London to Cape Town. I then got assigned overseas. I went to work in Central and Eastern Europe. I was in Moscow for 11 years. And we kept talking about it, but as you know, things always get in the way. Work was going really well, but in those long winter's nights in Moscow, and they are very long and very cold, with the advent of the internet, we sort of spent a lot of time planning, visioning, following other people's blogs, and then other things came along the way, Alisha and Lucy, and I suppose the size of the family got bigger, the size of the trip got bigger, the size of the vehicle got bigger, and we eventually got to the stage of, are we really going to do this or not? Or are we just going to spend the rest of our lives talking about it and dreaming about it? And there came a good point for me at work that it would have been a good time to take a break. And I think we looked at the age of the children. We wanted the children to be old enough that we didn't have to carry lots of extra equipment like push chairs and nappies and things, and to have a little bit of an awareness of danger, and I suppose to understand to some extent the word no. And we also didn't want Alisha to be primary school. We originally planned on going for 3 years. Very early in the trip, we decided we couldn't quite make it around the world in 3 years, so we abandoned that and rescheduled it to 4 years. And I think that's one of the things about planning is it's important, I think, to plan these trips, but you have to be very flexible because the plans constantly change. I'm a consummate planner, so I like to have a detailed plan, and so I get a slightly out of kilter when the plan can't be executed and things have to change. But usually what I do then is when that happens is when it's just go and replan. And I think one of the biggest examples from our trip very early on is for 18 years of our planning, we were always going to leave England and drive across Europe to Asia. And then about 4 to 6 months before we actually went, we suddenly changed and went completely the other way around the world. We shipped to North America. And looking back on it now, I've forgotten why. So it just shows how it can change. Choosing a vehicle. This was our vehicle in its early stages with the sort of box being built. It's very difficult choosing a vehicle. There is no ideal vehicle. Every vehicle is a series of compromises. I always say the ideal vehicle is something small, nimble, great off-road while you're driving. And then when you stop, it's as big as possible and gives you as much room and comfort as possible. But until they invent a TARDIS vehicle, which would expand for you like that, you have to make a compromise. So it's a very personal choice, and what's right for one person isn't right for another. I think we looked at it as we were going to be away for a considerable amount of time. We wanted a feeling of a home, so we didn't want to be dependent on staying in hostels or hotels, and we wanted to be able to live in our vehicle so that the children could feel they had a home environment. We needed something that could cope with weather extremes, so cold weather and hot weather. And I think with the schooling aspect, for them to have somewhere they could sit at a table and do their schooling each day. So, the truck, it's a very big vehicle. I had to pass my HGV license to be able to drive it. And it was quite daunting to start with driving it. But we still managed to get off the beaten track, down riverbeds and all that sort of thing. Our biggest problem with the truck is trees. So anything overhanging because of our height. That's our real biggest thing.
Now, we started off the trip in North America. Steve said that wasn't our original plan, but we figured actually it was a really good start. I actually thought that Mexico would be the start of, the adventure, but actually we came to love North America, its beauty and its wide open spaces. So our route was, we shipped to Halifax from Europe, and I went around the Great Lakes, went straight across Canada, the sort of boring bit, I hate to say, through Saskatchewan, just straight, wheat fields either side, till we hit the Rockies. Then from the Rockies, we headed down, wiggled through the national parks of the US, went to California, drove down through Baja, California, and then shipped across to mainland Mexico. As you can see on the map, then we wiggled through Mexico, all the way through Central America, and eventually we shipped across the Darien Gap to South America. So we thought the US and Canada was such an easy start for us. Huge, big vehicle, not used to driving it. We did do a little sort of shakedown trip through Italy where we realised it really was quite big for European roads. But it was a really fantastic start. We weren't used to living together all the time. Steve used to work away 5 days a week. So the kids and I were a nice little unit, and then Steve came, and then suddenly we were all in a tiny truck together. It really did oh my goodness, we're together. But it must have worked out quite well, because within that sort of initial cross-Canada time, that's when we decided to go for an extra year. So there was quite a lot of shakedown, shall we say, but we managed in the end. We love the national parks in the US and Canada. As I say, wasn't our sort of looking forward. We didn't think, wow, this is going to be amazing, but we absolutely love them. Great camping, really easy. You bought a card for a year, you could go to as many as you liked. Perfect. And it was also our introduction to boondocking, or wild camping, as you might call it. We'd sort of, gone to this is on the Grand Canyon. We'd gone to the southern side and gone to all the campsites, and they'd been so busy. We're like, we just want to get away from people, etc. So we went around to the north side, and we still really hadn't sort of clued into where you could wild camp and what was legal and etc. And while we were queuing up for this campsite, which was full, some guy said, don't stay here. There is a fantastic forestry site, a few more kilometres down, and you'd be right on the edge of the canyon. And so we headed off, and you can camp for free in a lot of the forestry land in the US. And this is the spot. All it was a sort of brick with a number on it and a fire ring. But we had the most beautiful view. We didn't see a single person the whole day. And we were like, okay, this is what we need to do. This is far more our style. And throughout the world, we've tried to wild camp as much as we can. In some places, security concerns, or maybe it's not legal, we didn't. But where we could, we did. And we've camped in some bizarre places. We've slept in a police station, a fire station, a drive-in cinema. I mean, our personal choice is to sleep way out in sort of the countryside, no one around. But we have sort of ended up in some bizarre places. And the US also gave us an introduction to what the neighbours like to tell you. Not in a campsite or somewhere else, but the neighbouring countries. When we're in the US and we sort of talk to people, we say, where are you going? What cool rig, where you go off to? We go, oh, we're off to Mexico and Central America. People suck their teeth straight away, like, oh, you'll be dead within minutes. And of course, it's always the way, particularly with Mexico, but we found this the world over. People watch the media, talk to, believe things about themselves, about their neighbours. It's always worse. The neighbours have always got it worse. It's always far more dangerous next door. So we learned to take it with a huge pinch of salt. That, don't believe. They'd always say, like, we're really good, but next door it's terrible. Yeah, and you will, yeah. So we took it, we checked the FCO advice, we listened to other people, but we always take it with a huge pinch of salt, because it's never that.
Well, as you can expect, we didn't get killed or anything in Mexico when we first arrived. In fact, we found Mexico to be a sensationally beautiful country, an amazingly diverse country. And I think one of the most things that I remember now, looking back nearly 4 years, was the food. In the US, there's lots of food, but whenever we ate out, food was always very fatty. The portions, you order for one and you could feed the family. And so we found actually the food was better buying the supermarkets and you could cook it yourselves. But it was almost the other way around when we got to Mexico. The supermarkets were not as well stocked, but the restaurants and the local food, the street food was fantastic. And you actually saw the variety of the food as you went through Mexico. Each region had its different food. And so we spent a lot more time eating out in Mexico. And Mexico really was that sort of introduction to us to a completely different culture. The diversity of things that we saw, volcanoes, we went through the Mayan culture, the Aztec culture, and the friendliness of the people. Everyone was really friendly to us. We met other people traveling, but also the local people were extremely kind to us. There were areas that we had been advised to not go to, and there were certain parts that we stayed clear of because of some of the problems there. But Mexico was fantastic. And Central America as a whole is very much like a microcosm, because it's all very small countries, but with incredible diversity. You've got the nature in Costa Rica. Again, you've got the Mayans in Guatemala. You've got wonderful volcanoes and lakes in Guatemala. And so you were very quickly immersed into lots of different things. We went to Belize, where you've got a very Caribbean culture. And that was, a great introduction to overlanding. But I suppose it came with one downside, was the border crossings, because every few hundred kilometers you hit another border, and the border crossings in Central America were not the easiest. When we look back on our trip around the world, there was usually a mountain of paperwork that needed to be filled in. They wanted 3 copies of this document, 2 copies of this document. We followed some other people's blogs, and some people were very good. We're not very good at this, but some people were very good at actually detailing precisely how to get through a border. So we would turn up to the border with 3 copies of our vehicle registration document, 2 copies of this, and often that was extremely helpful. But with anything, these things change so quickly. So we'd sometimes come armed with all the paperwork, and it was just, no, that's not how it works. You need to do something different. And on one border, when we left Guatemala to get into El Salvador, we were heading to the border, and about 10 kilometers from the border, there was a line of trucks. And it was like, what do we do now? So we stopped, spoke to the truck driver in front of us, and worked out that he was expecting to be there about 2 days to get through the border. And we thought, well, we don't think we really want to sit in a truck queue for 2 to 3 days waiting to get through a border. He encouraged us to just drive past all the trucks there, because we weren't a truck driver, we were a tourist, and so we didn't need to wait in the trucks queue. The only problem was it was a single lane road, and on our side of the road, it was just a line of trucks, so our side was completely blocked. The other way was pretty free, so we set off. The problem was the trucks coming the other way were using that side of the road. Fortunately, the truck drivers on our side some would leave gaps, and we were able to just push in. But it was getting harder and harder to get along. Eventually, a guy on a motorbike offered to help. And what happened is Gilly jumped on the back of the motorbike. He would speed up maybe 400 meters where we could see him and wave me through that I could go that 400 meters, then tuck in before the trucks came the other way. And for 10 kilometers, spent about an hour going along this way, and eventually got through the border. But it was pretty hairy. In some of the places where we passed, there was this much between the trucks to squeeze through. But it was a pretty hairy thing. But we got through the border. Languages, traveling is a great opportunity to learn new languages, and the beauty of Central America and South America is if you exclude Brazil, you only have to learn one, which is Spanish. When you get to places like Asia or Africa, of course, each language in each country is different, and it's widely different from English. So we both spoke a little bit of Spanish. Gilly has learnt Spanish better than me. I just babble until some words come out that can be vaguely understood and start piecing them together. Because I've worked abroad in many countries, usually when I babble, I'm talking 4 different languages at the same and hoping one word will connect. But we found it was a great thing to, obviously spending 4 months in Central America and then a further 12 months in South America, our Spanish did improve, and we had some great conversations meeting up with Spanish people, and it's a fantastic opportunity to learn a new language. The other thing that was great is meeting up with fellow overlanders, and Central America, I think, was one of the easiest places to meet other people traveling, because you're all going through this very narrow bit of land, so there's, you all got to go the same way. And so we kept meeting up with people in one campsite or in an area, and then 3 or 4 days later we'd bump into them again. And that was great, because there's nothing better than sharing stories around the campsite, sharing it around the fire, having a few drinks together, and it helped build up our confidence, learning off other people's experience. And I think this was a fantastic camp we had in Nicaragua, where we camped on a remote beach. 4 of us, we were only intending to stay there a couple of nights, but it was so lovely, and we were having such good fun, we ended up spending the week there.
Now, obviously, Steve's responsibility was the driving, and so I took over the homeschooling, which was, I'm actually a trained teacher, but teaching my own children was the huge sort of thing that I had to get over. How was I going to do that? And I loved it, and I think they've done very well, and it took a while for us to shake down, work out what worked for us, but what we found for us is they did 2 hours of formal learning every day, or including the weekends. We had breaks off if it was border crossing or if we were doing something fantastic, and then they would do sitting down at the desk working on something. We kept the UK curriculum for maths and English, but we were able to go beyond. So, for instance, Alicia's a fantastic reader, so we could go way above what she would learn, on the national curriculum. What was interesting to her, we had plenty of scope to do that. And then the rest of it, we did topics about where we were, and that was where we all got excited, because you can imagine as you were travelling through all these different countries, you'd say, okay, what's great about this country, what would be really interesting, and then we'd go and research and find out, and they'd learn about that. And it wasn't just for me, it was often from the girls. They would say, yeah, let's do something different. We've done, I think we're in Brazil, and we've done about sort of the history and some of the natural history as well, and they were like, can we do Victorians? And I'm like, I don't think that fits with Brazil. And well, why not? Let's do it. So it was 42 degrees in Brazil. We were sort of sweating buckets. It was very humid, and they're learning about Victorians. And obviously, being homeschooled, you get a chance to not just read a book or something else like that. So they're dressing up in Victorian clothes. Well, we don't have many clothes, but they were sort of putting on my huge skirts and putting about 6 sort of other skirts underneath, and sort of prancing around with keys, pretending they were Victorian sort of house mistresses or housekeepers, and this 42 degrees. So you can mix it up. It's totally up to, that's what we did, mix it up depending on what they were doing. But it gave us some amazing opportunities. I'm a biology teacher, so the opportunity to go to the Galapagos absolutely blew me away, and I hoped I transmitted my enthusiasm to them, and it was great. What we did was we always usually sort of learnt about something on the lead up to it. So before we went to the Galapagos, we learnt all about evolution. They learnt about how the volcanic islands came up. It was really, really good, because when we got to the Galapagos, we were on a little boat, and there was a guide with us. They understood what was going on, and they could ask. And the guide was like, wow, guys, she was only 5 at the time. How do you know so much? But she really stimulated her imagination, and she loved it. And what proved to me how well we were doing with the homeschooling, this is in Sacsayhuama in Peru, outside Cusco. Not schooling day, nothing to do with this. This is, Alicia's wearing her home-stitched, she's a great sewer, so she hand-stitched this dress, and she decided she was going to wear it and be an Inca princess. Lucy is her servant, and they're going through the whole ritual. This has nothing to do with me. This is just on a walk. We're just there, and that's what they've decided to do. They took the ideas of what they'd learnt and made their own creative spin on it. So that's when we realised that, okay, it seems to be working very well. At the bottom of South America, obviously it's not part of our overlanding trip, but because we were there and we had plenty of time to hang around and wait for a good deal to go on a boat, we got a good deal to go to Antarctica. So we got all the way down to the bottom, and while we were doing it, we sort of learnt about the history of Antarctica and also about the natural history as well. And so they were also prepped when we went on this boat. They knew what they were doing.
This actual picture is us making a gingerbread Antarctica. So we got the paper template, then cut all the way around it, and then there were some other kids around, and we just completely ate the whole thing in about 5 minutes flat.
Yeah, they had Shackleton and Scott's route pinned on in different things out of this gingerbread map. It was fantastic. Here's them doing some maths in the Kruger National Park, a tally chart in the morning, working out exactly which animals they saw, came back, did the maths on it. Things like geology in the Kimberleys, we learnt all about the different types of geology. There we are, just out on a walk, turn around, find them. Oh yeah, look at this, look at this. So they picked it up.
This photo is actually Lucy eating a fat-bottomed ant. They do them fried in, where is it? Colombia, that's it. I think for this actual photo she was faking it because she just wanted to have a photo. But then later she did eat it and then reached out straight for her Easter basket, which was full of chocolate. But if you're traveling around the world, you get a lot of opportunity to eat really strange, weird stuff. I mean, possibly a weird one was possibly this spicy grasshoppers opportunity. So you just had grasshoppers and then just sprinkled chili on them. Personally, I'm not sure which was more damaging, the chili or the grasshopper, but yeah, that was quite an interesting one. Hands up whoever's had a guinea pig. Who's ever had a guinea pig? So quite a few of you? Yeah? Okay. This is a guinea pig castle in a restaurant in Peru. They eat them. I'm not entirely sure how they cook them. Baked, fried, sliced up and served with cheese sauce. But it's certainly one way to eat a guinea pig. But when we saw this, we thought, oh gosh, they got pet guinea pigs. That's really great. And then later we discovered they're eating them. Isn't it? Burgers? Oh yeah. One of our favourite things to eat, well, home-cooked meals you might call it, is we do burgers, homemade burgers. But, you know, you're around the world, you haven't got beef every single time. So we made them with a few different ingredients. We've had burgers made of... Don't whisper. Beef, we've had some pork ones, lamb, chicken. Then we've had some weirder ones, kudu, ostrich, oinks, kangaroo and buffalo, which were a range of different places. Is that your study?
So after Central America, we shipped to South America. And everyone we met coming the other way who'd come from South America, Central America, said, you'll see a lot of similar things that you've seen in Central America, but in South America, everything's just so much bigger. You know, the countries are bigger, the volcanoes are bigger, the jungles are bigger, everything is so much bigger. And they were right about that. So we ended up doing a rather convoluted route of South America. You might envisage you have a nice circuit. It didn't quite work out that way. Various mechanical issues, and just the roads and the timings meant we went sort of quite higgledy-piggledy. Originally, I wanted to turn left from Colombia and go to Venezuela, mainly to go to the Amazon jungle, because you might remember all that time ago, England were playing Italy in Manaus for the World Cup, their opening World Cup game. I think, fortunately, we missed that. So we ended up going down the Andes, cutting across to Brazil, going back down the Andes, ending up at the bottom, and then working our way back up. So it was quite a convoluted loop. But the wonderful thing about South America is it was absolutely a sensational continent. I think looking back on it, because it's easier sometimes looking back and comparing the continents, it was actually an extremely easy continent to travel in. We didn't need any visas. I think maybe you do in the very northeast corner, some of the smaller states, but we didn't need any visas. No carnet de passage for the vehicle, so nothing for the vehicle. No countries where they're required you to have guides or special permits to take the vehicle in. Quite relaxed, what we call temporary import permits when you import your vehicle, and visas, how long you're allowed to stay in the country. So many times you could stay 90 days. So very easy. And then when it comes to border crossings, of course, it's so much bigger than Central America. So you're not crossing a border every few days. In fact, you're only crossing every few months. So once you're in a country, there's a lot to see and do. And the border crossings were very easy. And some of them we were through in like 30 minutes. So really great continent to travel in, and just such fantastic diversity, from the Andes. That's the truck parked in Torres del Paine, a sensational campsite. I'm not quite sure we were meant to be there, but the Chileans are so friendly, no one would tell us that we weren't allowed to be there anyway, and we spent a wonderful evening there. And then you go to the Amazon. We took a riverboat trip about 6 hours up one of the tributaries of the Amazon to a community campsite, and actually slept in tents for 5 days in the jungle and walked into the jungle, and that was a fantastic experience as well. You've then got culture. You've got the local culture like Incas, but you've also got the very much the Spanish and the Portuguese culture there. So some amazing colonial cities with churches and all the history to walk around. I mean, the cities can be a bit of a challenge for us because of our size, and particularly some of the old Spanish cities because they build the roads not very wide. But we were usually able to find somewhere to camp. It might have been just a normal car park, but the wonder of the truck is, we can just climb inside and it's our own little room and our own space. And so we were able to camp there. We went up to the Sala de Uyuni, which is the biggest salt flat in the world at 3,500 meters. And again, a surreal experience. We went in there with a couple of other overlanders. We met up beforehand and said it would be good to go together because people get stuck in the Sala de Uyuni. We know people who've been there for 2 days digging a vehicle out. So the four of us, four vehicles, decided to go together. They said, we're glad you're coming because when we get stuck, you're big enough to pull us out. And I said, well, I suppose I'm quite glad you're coming because if I get stuck, you can go and get someone who's bigger to pull me out. But we didn't get stuck at all. We spent the most amazing few days on this salt flat, and it was brilliant. Then the Pantanal. We had to cross 120 rickety bridges with a weight limit supposedly of 10 tons. But if you've seen them, and we have a video of it, they look scary even in a car. We weigh 10 tons. The worst thing is you had to cross all these 120 bridges to get to the end of the road. It was the end of the road. So to come back, you had to turn around and go back across all the 120 bridges, knowing that you'd just been across and could have displaced the planks. But again, the Pantanal, it was very hot, but stunning. And I don't know how many people have watched Planet Earth. And if you've seen the one in the Pantanal where the jaguar kills the crocodile, well, we saw the same thing. We were very fortunate. We followed this jaguar as it was hunting, swimming in the riverbanks. We didn't quite get the same camera footage as the BBC got because it killed the crocodile sort of in the reeds. We could hear it going on and we saw it slightly drag it away, but we didn't get quite as good a camera footage. But amazing. And what we particularly loved about South America, some of our best campsites, when you get down to Patagonia, there's no people. So you just pull off and you've just got all this space to yourself, and you can have a campfire. You've got the stars above you. It can get cold, even in summer. It can reach highs of, like here, 12, 13 degrees, although it's not as wet. And it's just an amazing thing. And then some really epic drives across South America. People might have heard of things like the Death Road in Bolivia, but there's a lot of other roads. This was the Canon del Pato, which is when you drive up from the coast in Peru up into the Andes. There's over 100 roughly cut tunnels that have been hacked out with a pickaxe by hand by man, and some of them we had a couple of inches either side, and they're about 600 meters long. And yes, we did meet oncoming traffic, at which point halfway in the tunnel you've got the question, who is reversing? And usually you go, I'm bigger than you, so you're reversing. But wonderful. And then people might have heard of the Carretera Austral in Chile, another about 1,200 kilometer strip of road. Some of it is tarred, some of it is not. Sensational scenery, and again, sensational wild camping. you want to touch on Antarctica?
So it's just as I said before about Antarctica, we were very lucky to be waiting around in the bottom of South America, Terra del Fuego, a nice place to hang out. You know, beautiful scenery, beautiful wildlife, and a boat came available that we could go on and get a last-minute deal. So the biggest problem we had actually was Lucy was only 6. And they're kind of expedition cruises. The one we went on in the end was a Russian scientific vessel. And 6 months of the year they rented it out to a sort of cruise company, but in the other 6 months of the year it did scientific work. But in the end it turned out to be perfect. It turned out to be one of the most adventurous sort of cruises they did that there was available, and they were very happy to take a child. And weirdly enough, they actually had 2 other children on board. Sorry.
We did actually threaten to leave Lucy behind with some old lady for a couple of weeks while we went off to Antarctica.
So luckily we found a boat and we loved it. It was really, if anyone ever gets the opportunity to go down there, it is fantastic. It wasn't part of our overlanding trip, but it was something that we all really, really loved. And I really hate boats. I am sick on a mill pond. So I spent 2 days throwing up on the Drake Passage going over, but when this is our sort of first proper morning in Antarctica, and even sort of 12 hours into being there, I was like, it was worth it. It was worth everything. It's so beautiful and just so different from anything you'll ever see. We got a great opportunity to sleep out on the ice. They told you to dig a grave, so you're below the wind line. You get a bivvy bag and a sleeping bag, and off you go, and you sleep there. That's Lucy, who slept in the middle of Steve and I, and it was fantastic. We woke up in the morning. It never really got dark. It just sort of, the sun just dipped below the horizon for a couple of hours. And woke up in the morning, there's penguins there, leopard seals there, and a pod of humpback whales playing in the bay in front of you. It was just magical. And obviously the stars were, they didn't fully come out, but you could see everything. It was just beautiful, blew us away. Now, Lucy, do you want to tell us about one of your most favourite things?
Do you know when you go to Antarctica or just watch a movie about it, you think or you see, you will think that they're going to be snowy white as penguins white as the snow. And the thing is, they are as white as snow, but the snow isn't very white. In fact, they have poo smeared all down their fronts and a bit of their backs and wool. Because the thing is that they poo on the snow and then they slide down it on their bellies. Yeah, and that makes them covered in poo. There's 3 different colours of penguin poo. One is red, and I think it's shrimps and stuff. Yeah, shrimps. Then there's white, which is fish, and green, which is squid, and others.
So Lucy actually thinks David Attenborough has a special crew that washes the penguins before the BBC filmed them, because she said it's nothing like it is on, we'd shown her some of the movies, and she said they're nothing like that. They also stink, don't they? Yeah. But it's not all wonder on the road. Things can go wrong, and I would be the first to admit I did an office-based job. My mechanical skills still are very close to zero. Before I set off, they were zero. We have managed to master changing tyres or changing a wheel. The thing is, with our truck, those wheels weigh 120 kilos. So with just the 4 of us, or really just 2 of us, getting them off and getting them back on is quite a challenge. And fortunately, usually when you have a puncture like that, people stop. And in some places, people stop and refuse to let us do anything, especially if it's a big group of Latin American men. It's like, no, you can't do it. Certainly Gilly couldn't do it. And they take the wheel off and change it for you, which is just fantastic. But yes, we were really lucky. Over 4 years, we never were completely stranded anywhere. The closest we came to it was in Alice Springs in Australia. We'd been camping in the wilds in the McDonnell Ranges for about a week, right off the road, away from everyone. And we pulled into Alice Springs, and we decided we'd spend a night in a campsite to get washing done and what have you. And we went to start the next morning, and my battery exploded. and so there was no battery. It took about 5 days for the new battery to come up from Adelaide. It wasn't a problem. We were in a campsite in Alice Springs, plenty to do and keep us busy. But we were just thinking if that had happened one of the previous days when we're 300-400 kilometres from anywhere, it would have been a bit of a different experience. So we were very fortunate in that respect. Do you want to talk about what happened in South Africa?
This is actually what we call the flood. It's quite an interesting story. We had dinner one night. We were standing in this lovely campsite at the bottom of a hill, very nice, lots of trees, had a nice shower, that sort of thing. And well, we had dinner and we went in bed. I was reading my book, and generally when I read a book, you can't snap me out. I heard a noise and I looked outside, and I realised we were actually now camping in a river. The whole campsite had been flooded, not very high, I mean approximately up to your shins, but still, we didn't particularly want to stand there and get possibly sunk and go lower and lower and lower and lower, which would have been a nightmare to wash. Mummy and Daddy hopped into the cab, me and Lucy stayed in the back, couldn't be bothered, and they started to drive out. Now, what we had completely forgotten was that they had dug a big hole next to the road up to the hill. We just fell into the hole because the water was all the same level. So that's us kind of half buried in water and mud. So it was so they were really nice and they let us go up and sleep in one of their bungalows. So the next morning we came back and they had a digger, and the digger tried to pull the truck out, and then the digger got stuck. So the digger spent an hour digging himself out, and then they managed to pull the truck out finally, which was such a relief after all the, just general being stuck. Has anyone else ever been stuck? I think it's a bit difficult not to.
I think with that photo doesn't do it justice, because we really need the photo taken in the middle of the night, because that's when all the sort of flash flood had washed away. Beforehand on that, the water was above the light on the far side, and my worry as we went out at 11 o'clock at night in the pitch black was, would it tip the truck over during the night? So I as you can imagine, I didn't sleep. I was down there at 6 a.m. And then the other thing is when the digger tried to pull it out, we had to stop it one way, because if he kept pulling, it would have tipped the truck right over. So fortunately, we only probably got stuck 2 or 3 times in the entire trip. We dug ourselves out of sand a couple of times, but that was probably the scariest. One thing people ask about is shipping. I'm not going to talk too much about shipping, because if people know, there's a map room being run by Overland Sphere, which is you see where the cafe is. If you go to the back of the cafe, there's some workshops being done there where people are going to answer questions. I'm going to be on a number of panels. Gilly's on a panel tomorrow. And certainly there's people who are much more specialised in shipping than we are. We've actually shipped 5 times. Every time it's been by roll-on, roll-off, which is basically how Toyota and Ford ship thousands of vehicles around the world. I've actually been on one of the ships in Durban in South Africa. They asked me if I would like to have a tour of the ship when they were bringing the truck on. Normally you're not allowed into any of the ports. In South Africa they didn't seem to care. I just breezed into the port with some minor security, and then I was taken on the ship. I mean, it's basically like a multi-story car park. Most of the car parking slots are, just this big, but there's usually 2 decks where they put all sorts of trucks on, and on this trip there was a whole bunch of mining equipment. They even had a helicopter on there, so it was interesting to see. But shipping is a big expense on any trip like this. Roughly, everyone always asks me how much did it cost. I can never remember, but a rough guide when you're going continent to continent is about $75 a cubic meter. So clearly that depends on how big your vehicle is, and that's for roll-on, roll-off. Container shipping is often a different price. On top of that, every port has a different set of fees. Some of them also charge per cubic meter, some of them charge a flat fee, and then you have agents involved. The thing is with shipping, it's really, you spend ages trying to navigate your way through this. And if you go to, I think one of the talks is going to talk about shipping in the map room, and there's now a company that's actually helping overlanders, because you spend ages researching it. And then when you contact the shipping companies, they're just not used to dealing with people who are driving a truck or driving a vehicle. When you say, I would like to ship a vehicle, one vehicle. They say, what, 100, 1,000? And you say, no, I'd like to ship one. And they set up to deal with Toyota and the big car manufacturers. So it can be quite painful. But in the end, we had some really good relationships with the shipping companies that were really helpful. Once they get to hear about your trip and your story, it sort of breaks their day, and it's an interesting thing for them. So if you can get them engaged in what you're doing, they're much, much more helpful than if they just see you as, another line on a schedule. So that's the shipping. I think we were asked to split our talk. So tomorrow at noon, we're going to talk about Africa, Australia, and then coming back through Asia and Europe. But we're going to end that today. I hope that's been useful and just giving you a very tiny insight into our time on the road in North and South America. In total, we spent about 2 years across North, Central, and South America and Antarctica, and that was an amazing time. But we're open to answer any questions people may have.
We'll be back shortly at Adventure Overland 2017 with another Travel Times Talks. But for now, do check out any of our other videos. And of course, as always, a big thanks to Rimmer Brothers, who have partnered with us to bring you these talks. Their new popular parts catalogue is available for all Land Rover vehicles and is a great addition to your glove box. For more information, also do check out www.rimmerbrothers.co.uk.